A joyful and blessed Sunday morning to all of you. Today, Dr. Donald Sheppard, the pastor of the Watson Temple Institutional Church of God in Christ, shares an assembly message given to young students during Black History Month. Listen in now, as Dr. Sheppard encourages the young people by telling them, everything is going to be all right.
A noted historian, J. Wells, said that Black History Month cannot be celebrated without noting the great contributions of Black churches. And I want you to just ponder that just for a moment while I thank a couple of people. Thank you so much, Allie Jordan, for that great, wonderful introduction. Hope I can live up to some of that. I want to thank you, our principal, Mr. Blessing, and Dr. Thomas, and the entire administration for this opportunity, and the teachers, and I see a lot of parents as well. And all of you, every one of you, thank you for taking the time to reflect on African American history. Today, in a few words, I want to contemplate the church and suggest that it plays a significant role in African American history. Historians have argued church and African American history cannot be separated. The suggestion is that the Black church and Black history are a part of one another, and it is appropriate to talk about the two together. Now, you heard me refer to, quote unquote, the Black. I'm using an academic term which started as, quote unquote, the Negro Church by author E. Franklin Frazier. The term evolved to the Black Church through another author Eric Lincoln. The Black Church includes about 7 major denominations. And I won't name them all, but I will make note of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, also known as AME Church. And I'm going to make note of the Church of God in Christ, because that is the denomination that I'm a part of and serve as pastor. Before I get started, I want to ask your help today. I need you to help me with a long phrase I'd rather not say all by myself. So I'm going to ask you to say half of it. So every time I say, I've got a feeling, I want you to say, everything will be all right. Okay? So let's try it. I'm going to say, I've got a feeling, and you're going to say, everything will be all right. Okay? I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
Oh, you did good. You did good. All right, let's try one more time. I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
Awesome, awesome. Feelings. Feelings are important in the Black church. Maya Angelou once said, and I quote, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel." So with that in mind, feelings and emotions are very important in the Black church. Perhaps this is because of the pain, struggles, coping with loss, and triumphs embedded in African American history. Feelings are important. And I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
You're on it. Awesome. Now, picture this in your mind. One Wednesday evening on a June summer day last year in South Carolina, a 21-year-old Caucasian male tugged on the front door of a large urban church. It was considered a quote-unquote Black church. And as he walked in, there were hardly anyone there to greet him. On a normal Sunday morning, there would be hundreds of people flowing in and making their way to the beautiful plus seats. However, tonight, he had to find his way downstairs to a small assembly where about 15 people were gathered in Bible study. When he got there, he noticed that he was the only one of his race there. But it was all right because the people welcomed him and made him feel very comfortable. As a matter of fact, during the Bible study, he almost changed his mind about doing what he had come to do. The people were so nice, but his thoughts were not very nice. And he had an evil intention. His plans were to promote hate and to start what he called a race war. So at the end of the Bible study, he took out his weapon and unmercifully shot down 9 of the people there, including the pastor. I know this sounds horrific, and it is. Unfortunately, it is a true story. What a tragedy. It shook the community of Charleston, South Carolina. Not only Charleston, South Carolina, but it shook the entire nation. Why would anyone do such a thing? Why would anyone try to start a conflict between people of different races? And why in the church? Why in this particular church? I'm not sure that anyone can ever answer these questions. However, to get a grip on the scope of this tragedy, we have to go back hundreds of years in church history. Travel in time with me. In 1735, there were 2 Caucasian Methodist ministers who came to the United States from England by the name of John and Charles Wesley. They welcomed African American slaves into their churches. But the pressures of their times and the ideology of slavery forced racial tensions, problems, and division within the church. Half a century later, in 1787, a former slave named Richard Allen was praying in the Methodist church. He and other African Americans were pulled from their knees and told that they were in the wrong section. After that day, Richard Allen and others formed black-owned churches called African Methodist Episcopal churches, or AME churches. One of these churches became the Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina. Yes, the church that Dylan Roof walked in that Wednesday night. The Emmanuel AME Church, after being established, continued to have challenges. But I've got a feeling
Everything will be all right.
awesome. In the next century, 1822, one of the ministers in this church by the name of Denmark, BC, began to secretly organize a slave revolt. The church had about 3,000 members at that time, consisting of slaves and newly freed slaves. Denmark, BC secretly organized leaders so that word got around the slaves that they were going to run away at a certain time, at a certain date. Approximately 9,000 slaves had planned to break free. That's almost as many as is in our school. However, the master of one of these slaves found out about the plan. When the masters discovered that there was to be an escape and it was on the way, they zoomed in on Denmark, BC and murdered him and other leaders. They also burned down the Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina. The members were devastated, afraid, and had no place to go. But I've got a feeling
Everything will be all right.
the members of the church started meeting secretly, and they did so for 31 years. After the abolishment of slavery and Abraham Lincoln's signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, Emmanuel AME Church was reorganized. The Emmanuel Church, like many other black churches, became central and key in the African American community. The black churches became the first sources of land ownership for slaves in America. Church buildings were also community meeting centers and schools until permanent structures were built. They also served as political halls, shelters for visitors, or what we call hotels, temporary community theaters, and concert halls for religious and secular plays and programs. Before and during the Civil Rights era in the mid-1900s, Emmanuel AME was the host of several great speakers, including Booker T. Washington and Martin Luther King Jr. In the black community, it was the church that made sure that members had enough food. The church even served as a hospital in Selma, Alabama, when protesters of unfair voting rights had to run for their lives. Even today, the church serves as a platform and source of information and support. So when Dylan Roof walked into the Emmanuel AME Church that day, he not only faced 15 people he saw, but he faced the faith and resilience of a rich history. And this brings me to the point I want to make today. In the African American experience, the church has always been central and a place of reference. African Americans always used the church as a place of healing. Even when things were hurtful, one could run to the church and find a comforting word, a word that sounds something like this: I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
This tragedy last June in Emmanuel AME Church brought people together. The conflict and war among the races that Dylan Roof wanted to start did not happen. As a matter of fact, at the end of the week, all races of people were joining hands in unity and were determined to outweigh this bad with good. It was a beautiful coming together. Even the families of the victims told the young man in court that he was forgiven, even though there was great pain in their hearts. People were determined to come together and say, I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
Even with tears in their eyes and questions in their minds, they dared to say, I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
It is this same tenacity and determination that we must have in the face of adversity. In a sense, the concept, the spirit, and the resilience of the black church are ones in which every one of us and all of us can participate. We can make ourselves a central place of healing. We can become a resource and connect the desperate souls to the waters of comfort and relief. We can be a friend and a person of refuge rather than one of conflict and pain. We can take on the challenge of standing up for what is right and just. We can be an advocate for peace and unity. And even when things get tough and we don't see our way or things don't go our way, we can still lift our heads high and say, I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
We can be the center of light so that someone who is lost can find their way. When someone is feeling low and they're having a bad day, we can be sure to tell them that I've got a feeling.
Everything will be all right.
So when I look at you and you and you, I see those who set the tone for this generation. I get encouraged because I see your abilities to lift up hung down heads. I see your abilities to build bridges between racial divides and cultural differences. I see, when I look at you, great courage to change and affect your environment for the better. And I got a feeling
everything will be all right.
when I look at you, I see a beacon of hope and a place of refuge. I see us celebrating our differences and finding strength in our uniquenesses. And I get the feeling
Everything will be all right.
so the concept of the black church in black history is not just for black people. It is for all who love comfort and strength in a sense of community. It is for all who will reach out and reach down even to heal a soul and let him or her know that we can make it together and it's going to be all right. We can get through our challenges. We can overcome any hill. We can tunnel through any of our valleys. We can get to even brighter days ahead because, like the Emmanuel Church, each of us is a beacon of hope. And I've got a feeling
Everything will be all right.
Thank you so much, and give yourself a